Welcome to this episode of Level with Emily Reese, featuring a conversation with composer Brian Schmidt. Brian composes for a game called Mutant Football League. It's the spiritual successor to a game for the Genesis that came out in 1993 called Mutant League Football. And Brian also scored that way back in 93. So Brian's been in game audio for a long time, more than 30 years, as you'll hear him explain. And as he explains, he's done it all in game audio, from composition to advocacy and mentorship and all the things. And with regards to his advocacy and mentorship, he has also been the president of the Game Audio Network Guild for 10 years. And so we talk quite a bit about that and his work with Gang, as they're called. And he's also run a convention in LA every fall for game audio professionals. It's called GameSoundCon, and it's really an amazing convention. Speaking from personal experience, I could not recommend that convention more. It is so much fun, and it's just a very tight-knit community of game audio professionals that are hanging out for the weekend, helping each other become better professionals and people. It's fantastic. So again, that's called GameSoundCon, so we talk about that. We also talk about a really amazing advancement for the video game music industry in terms of the Grammys. There's going to be a Grammy Award for the first time ever in February of next year for Best Video Game Score. There's a more official title, which he says. I can't exactly remember the perfectly named title of the category, but we talk about that and how long it took for that to actually become reality. Such a huge accomplishment for the industry. Also, that deadline for submissions is like now. Literally, I think today, Friday, August 26th. So, it's important that you submit your qualified video game soundtrack for a potentially the first ever video game music Grammy. Amazing. Such an amazing accomplishment. So those are some of the things that I talk about with Brian. Please join us on Discord to talk about this and all the other episodes. This episode, by the way, won't have music in it. There's not a ton of music in this episode to begin with, but if you want to hear Brian's music for Mutant League Football, for Mutant Football League, that's the newest one, you got to listen to the audio version of the podcast. Find that wherever you find your podcasts. So yes, join us on Discord. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel, and please become a patron to Level with Emily if you're able. That would be fabulous. We could definitely use your support. All right, well, here is Brian Schmidt.
I'm Brian Schmidt. I've been doing game music and sound for just over 35 years now. Amazing. Back from the arcade games and those old 16-bit consoles through Xbox and so on. I also founded a conference called GameSoundCon, which has actually apparently grown to be the largest professional game audio conference that there is, which has been kind of fun. It's been interesting these last couple of years with COVID and whatnot. But
is it a hybrid this year again?
Yes. Well, last year we were online only. The year before we were online only.
Okay.
Last time we were in person was 2019.
Okay. And this is always in the fall, so it's in October this year?
Yeah, we're October 25th and 26th this year. Typically in the fall. I've kind of settled into downtown LA to where it is, which is a nice place. It's the old Biltmore Hotel, which is this big old hotel that they film a lot of movies at, and it's got all this kind of cool history from Prohibition and whatnot. So it's kind of a fun vibe. But yeah, we're hybrid for the first time this year, so people can attend either remotely or in person. There's nothing quite like in person, but what surprised me with going the last couple of years is that GameSoundCon actually was pretty fun, even as an online only thing. I was actually very pleasantly surprised.
What do you think made that work in that way?
First and foremost, it's all the speakers, right? The stuff that people talk about. It's just, last year we had, we started doing something that's called a company deep dive, where we would get, multiple talks from one company. And so last year we had Riot do a deep dive. I think they had 4, maybe even 5 talks where here's how we do music, here's how we do sound design, here's how we do tech, here's how we do dialogue. So That's kind of fun. This year we have kind of a deep dive on Ratchet and Clank.
Nice.
Where we've got multiple talks, because it's such a great sounding game. So we've got multiple talks about, from the sound design team at Sony there for that. So, I think it comes down to the speakers, right? When you have a lot of really passionate people talking about stuff that they love to do, and they love to share it, that's kind of where it all comes from.
Yeah. And it's always been such a strong and vibrant and supportive community, too. And that's, I think, one of the things that I noticed right away the very first time I ever went to GameSoundCon, which I can't even remember what year that was now. I'd have to look at my stack of badges. But I just, that's the thing that one of my favorite things about the game audio community is the support that's there, the willingness to share tricks and things that you've learned and mentorship and just all the things around that community that I felt so strongly when I was the times that I have been to GameSoundCon. It's a really great community.
Yeah, the game audio community is pretty cool like that. I've always thought that one of the reasons for that was what we do is sort of so niche, and there's so much stuff behind the scenes that even as a, maker of linear audio, a film or TV audio producer, it's just not intuitive that you have to do all this stuff. That when we finally when we're finally in a room where we have people who kind of understand what we do and we get to talk about it, that we just can't shut up talking. It's like, hey, finally a group of people who understand what we do and why this interesting way of handling the dynamic sword swing power-ups is such a hard thing to do. And now I can share, how we did that.
Mm-hmm. So has the lineup for GameSoundCon been announced?
It's not been formally announced, although literally just a couple days ago, I finally populated the website.
Okay.
So that's like I said, the card table with the Post-it notes kind of came together in the last couple weeks.
Love that. Yeah.
So...
And so what has the attendance grown to? Do you know?
It's again, COVID just threw a total monkey wrench into everything. Right up to 2019. 2019, we had about 450.
Oh, wow.
And we'd had about 15 to 20% year-on-year growth attendance in person for the several years before that, leading up to that. And then, of course, COVID hit, and it's like...
Yeah, amazing.
But online, when we went online, we had well over 1,000.
Oh, and man, no kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it'll be interesting to see what it's like this year. I know a lot of people are very anxious to kind of get back in person again, but people are still slightly worried, a little in the back of their mind, what's going to go on. Mm-hmm. So I'm not quite sure what to expect, but
I mean, the fact that you had 1,000 when it was online only definitely speaks to the need for such a conference, right? Like, people want to participate in these kinds of things. And, clearly some people just can't because of the travel involved. So what a wonderful opportunity. Yeah,
it definitely lowers the barrier when you don't have to, get an airplane ticket and, fly from Portugal or something like that. Because we have a lot of international attendees. So in that sense, it was nice, and that's why we're trying out hybrid this year. It's like
cool, love it.
Which is simultaneously exciting and terrifying.
Yeah. Well, I think the margin of error, it kind of expands a little when you're involving so much tech to get something going, right?
Yeah, all it takes is one. That was the most interesting thing about doing it online, because the online conference I kind of ran from here.
Wow.
I have a little photo somewhere of 9 or 10 screens running, where I've got, 4 simultaneous sessions and monitoring real-time chats and live streaming of the videos that the presenters created. And, I'm thinking, but all it would take would be a power outage and
blow a fuse or something.
Yeah. Well, and actually since then, partly because of GameSoundCon, since the first one, I put in solar with whole house battery backup.
Yeah.
So kind of as a, and even then I bought a little generator and I measured the power usage of all the computers that I was using to run it. So, one little tech point can send the whole thing off.
Right.
But when you're in person, it's a little bit more flexible.
Yep.
But we are.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but we are pushing the Biltmore's tech a little bit. They had a big tech upgrade a few years ago, but I'm not sure. We've got 6 concurrent live streams we're going to be running from California. So
awesome. Well, it's just such a wonderful time, and I look forward to this year very much. And it's just fantastic. I tell people about it all the time, just because, GDC is one thing because it's industry people, right? So you're surrounded with your colleagues, which is great. But narrowing it down to the audio folks it's just, I just love the community. I say that all the time. I'm like, the community of GameSoundCon is the best. So,
thanks. So, yeah. I think, and it's something that people, especially people coming from film, I've never done film seriously. I I've assisted on a couple industrial films back when I was in college, but I'm not a film person. But most film composers and film sound designers, basically their message are, it's pointless to network with composers. You want to network with directors. And that makes sense. I get that. But in games, it's totally different.
Right.
In games, there's not that sort of magical person who is the director so much, where you have that connection between film director and film composer. Right. The person who's going to pick the composer for Call of Duty is probably audio director. Or audio director in conjunction with a game designer, and that person is themselves a current or former composer. Right. I think Paul Lipson of senior exec VP at Formosa.
Yep.
Hires lots of people who hire composers. He's a composer.
Right.
So today in games, today's friendly competitor in the composing space. Tomorrow is the audio director at Blizzard.
Right.
And now is in the person who's the seat of somebody doing the hiring. So networking within the industry, I think, is really important. That's GameSound's GDC is awesome for networking out, and I think GameSoundCon is a little bit better for networking in. Yeah.
And I think too, you bring a good point that there is an audio director, rather than like a music supervisor on a film or something like that. The audio director in games, it seems like the Foley and sound effects and UI, all of those sounds need to work with the music in a different way than that happens in film. I don't think of those departments as being quite as intertwined, and maybe they are, and I'm just wrong. But it seems like in games, all of the ambient sound, all of that also has to be working with the music in a way that doesn't necessarily achieve in film. Does that make sense? Do you think?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think they do. I mean, I was on a panel with Alan Howarth. Actually, I think it was a GDC panel a number of years ago.
Okay.
And he was talking about when he was doing this, because he did the sound design for like the first Star Trek films.
Okay.
And he was saying there was this one scene on, if you're a Star Trek nerd, it was on the Genesis planet.
Nice.
Where there's all these lava and earthquakes and rumblings. And so he actually called up the composer and said, hey, I forgot who the composer was on that film, probably James. Hey, I'm working on this scene. I'm probably going to have a lot of low end with all these rocks. And, the composer's like, okay, no string basses or timpani there. Not a problem. I'll leave the low end for you. So it happens a little bit in film, but in games, you don't know when the lava earthquake is going to happen. And so now you get into these weird interactive mixing techniques where, let's EQ down the string basses and the low percussion only when that sound effect is happening. And that's kind of the craziness we do in sound design. Mm-hmm. So I think you're right. I think it has to be a lot more integrated discipline because the elements interact off of each other. Yeah. Especially in a modern, the kinds of things that, I'm thinking back like the interactive mixing stuff that Overwatch was doing and priority based mixing and stuff.
How do you stay on top of all of the things that are happening? Do you think that's just because of, the network of people that that you're in tune with what Overwatch is doing? Because I'm assuming, Brian, that you're not sitting there playing Overwatch every night yourself. So
no, part of it, frankly, is it's been a kind of cool byproduct of GameSoundCon is that
sure.
I get to see all of what are. Right, I'm looking forward to seeing the Ratchet and Clank talk.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to see John Everest talk about how because he just got back from Abbey Roads, and he's going to talk about how he does his recording knowing that it's going to be implemented in a certain way in the interactive music engine. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing John's talk. And
yeah.
So that's certainly part of it. I do some teaching part-time too. So I try to kind of keep up on what's out there and,
yeah.
What are the tools doing? What's the industry doing?
And you're also president of the Game Audio Network Guild, which I'm sure informs you in many ways as well.
A different hat.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a minute, because the Game Audio Network Guild has been around for 20 years. How long have you been president?
About 10 of that.
Wow.
So it's been a while, yeah.
And you were one of the founders, right? Way back in the day.
Yeah, I was on there was like a founding board group. I wasn't at the very, very original. The original concept of it was, I know you had George Sanger on recently.
Yep.
Tommy Tallarico was at George Sanger's conference called Project Barbecue.
Yeah.
And that's where they came up with this idea of, hey, we should have an organization. So I wasn't at that, but pretty shortly after, I think I was at Microsoft at the time. And so they wanted, some corporate-y Microsoft person on it or something. But yeah, that's we do the big awards show every year. We used to do lots of live events. Now we're doing a combination of live and hybrid events, and kind of just trying to push the industry, forward in various ways. And
again, it's like kind of curating the community in a way too, or maybe not curating, but looking after and caring for, and like keeping people involved together in this thing,
Yeah, again, it's like you were saying about the community before, the game audio community. One of the things we do with Game Audio Network Guild, we have the thing called the Gang Scholars Program, where we take applications and we pick 5 students and we'll send them to GDC or send them to GameSoundCon, and then pair them up with, somebody like Austin Wintory or Penka Guniva or Tom Salta, some of the very, very top people in the industry, sort of from mentorship and kind of, help them answer their questions or help them get the most out of their networking contacts at the conference. So yeah, it's kind of an opportunity for people who have been in the industry a while to get back a little bit.
Yeah, very much so. What's coming up for Gang right now? Because I know the awards thing was a couple months ago, and so maybe you're in a little bit of a taking a break, so to speak, or
there are a couple. One thing that's very exciting is, of course, there's a new Grammy category this year.
Right.
So
yes.
That goes back a ways.
You've been working on that for a long time.
It was the first I got involved with it was in 1999. I got a call from Chance Thomas,
another composer,
because he was a game composer, film composer. He's he scored an Academy Award winning short called Chub Chub. So he's no slouch,
right?
And he was like, "Hey, we're trying to show Neris that game music isn't chip tunes anymore."
Yeah.
And so he got a group of about 10 of us together. I believe George was there, actually.
Okay.
And we were, hey, here's what game music is now. Here's some examples of it. We played some stuff for Leslie Ann Jones. I remember this. This was at Dolby headquarters in San Francisco. And because at the time there was a Grammy for Best Score Soundtrack for Film and Television.
Okay.
So games weren't even eligible.
Right.
And we chatted, and they sort of gave us a perspective. And a couple of years later, they added the words "and other visual media" to the film, television, and other visual media category. So our lobbying, after 2 years of effort, landed 4 more words in the category. And then at that time, that meant that a game soundtrack would be in the same category as, soundtrack for Apollo 13, the movie, or Harry Potter, or something like that.
Right.
And that was the category that Austin Wintory was nominated for back in 2012 for the score for Journey. Mm-hmm. And if I recall, he lost out to the soundtrack for the movie The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. And that's the way it was for a while. And then a couple years ago, some other folks picked up the ball, and it's hey, I say NARAS, it's the Recording Academy. They don't go by NARAS anymore. Hey, Recording Academy, let's talk about games again. And sure enough, after being shown sort of what the industry is like, the Academy decided, yep, it's time for a new category, specifically for game soundtracks. So yeah, they went back to the Academy, brought them up to date, showed them some of the amazing work that people are doing, and they're like, yeah, you're right. There should be a category. This is a unique form of musical expression for a piece of art. And so this year, for the first time in February, there will be the best score soundtrack for video games and other interactive media presented at the Grammys in February. And the reason I mentioned this in the context of Gang is that one of the things we as Gang have been doing is working very, very closely with the Academy to try and make sure that people's score soundtracks are in fact submitted and they know how to do it. There's a little bit of a chicken and egg sometimes with the Grammys, where in order to submit for the Grammy, you have to be a member of the Recording Academy. And the membership window is like in the winter. So what that means is since they announced the category, there are a lot of game composers who are not members of the Recording Academy and therefore couldn't submit their soundtracks.
Right.
But so what the Game Audio Network Guild did is we worked with the Recording Academy to register ourselves as a media company, which means that Gang now can enter score soundtracks to be eligible for a Grammy. And so we've had composers who are not part of the Academy say, hey, I released my soundtrack for my game that came out this year. Can you submit it for us? And so we've been facilitating that.
Okay. Now, I had such a good question about that too. So are individual composers then responsible for themselves to do that? Or are you and anyone else like thinking, oh man, that It Takes Two soundtrack was great, let's submit it, for instance? Or is it really, it's up to individuals?
It's the way that the policy Gang has taken is we will only submit a soundtrack to the Grammys on behalf of somebody who is authorized or associated with the soundtrack itself. So we wouldn't say random Take Two fan wants to submit the soundtrack for the Grammys. We won't do that. But the composer, the the developer, the designer, the publisher, we would do that.
Interesting. Do you have any kind of sense for how many submissions you'll have?
We've been steadily submitting them, and if history is any guide, we'll get most of them like the last couple days before the deadline.
Yeah. Are we talking dozens here, do you think? Or
I think there will be probably dozens of submissions. NARAS does have a rule. You have to have a certain amount of submissions of any category for it to exist as a category.
That makes sense.
I think it's like 35 or 40 or something like that. But
okay. Wow.
And the nice thing too is as a one of the things the Recording Academy, old habits die hard.
Yes, they do.
One thing the Recording Academy does pride itself on is recognizing excellence in music, whether it's, a giant session recorded at Abbey Road for a blockbuster game, or like Hades. It's not eligible because it came out too early, but an awesome little indie soundtrack. It's kind of like the way they want to recognize the great bedroom laptop singer-songwriter.
Yeah.
They want to also recognize excellence as, an indie developer with an indie composer who put out their soundtrack for their quirky indie game.
Right.
So definitely trying to encourage people to submit. Don't be intimidated by I'm never going to win against, Call of Duty or Destiny 2 or something like that. No, go ahead and submit. You never know, you'll land a nomination or maybe even a win.
Amazing. That's so fantastic. Grammys are always in February, so make sure you
first week in February.
Watch them.
Watch them. Somebody will be take home the first Grammy for best score soundtrack for video games or other interactive media this year.
That sent a chill down my spine. It's like scary in a great way. It's like so amazing. Yeah, because right around Journey, that was right around the time I started doing the podcast in the first place, was 2011.
Oh, yeah.
So,
wow.
So yeah, I remember all that going down. That's amazing. Yeah. That's going to be pretty, and what a remarkable achievement to finally have that happen. I mean, it's, we all, of course, say it's long overdue, but it's happened, and I'm grateful for that. It's going to be really exciting.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know better than anybody, right? Game music fans are very passionate fans.
They are.
And people listen to soundtracks for games. It takes them back to playing of the game. It's there's something about the active experience of playing a game combined with the music that just people really, really love. There were live video game concerts before there were live movie concerts.
Right. I just went to a show last night. I just went to there's a bar in Minneapolis called Ice House, and it was just a group of people. And they invited anyone with an instrument, come on up and play. I mean, it was great.
Oh,
it was
wow.
Very talented musicians playing, old Nintendo tunes, Zelda stuff, Mario stuff. And it was fantastic.
Right.
And of course, people playing Smash Brothers on the side.
Yes.
I mean,
yep.
And I am, compared to when I started talking about all this in 2011, the fact that that's so normal now, like, it's so normal in Minneapolis for there to be some kind of little game music concert somewhere. I love that. It's really great.
Yeah, you all had a game music conference a couple of years back.
We do. We do have one. Yeah, it's called VGMCon.
Right, VGMCon, yeah.
So much fun. Like, so much fun. Yeah, they were there last night too, so I got a chance to see Thomas, the founder. Yep. And next to GameSoundCon, and I've been saying this for years, like, those two are my jams. Like, those cons are just so great. Yeah, VGMCon is awesome. It's in April, so it's not ideal Minneapolis weather, but it could be worse usually. Yeah. So
and then MagFest is back, right? I mean, MagFest took off exponentially as well. It's again, people just love playing video game music.
Yep, and writing it too. Brian, do you write much these days? Are you composing much?
I do some. Yeah, okay. The early part of my career, I was doing like 25 games a year or something like that, like for the Genesis and Super Nintendo and arcades and stuff like that. These days, I'm audio director for a company called Digital Dreams Entertainment that does a game called Mutant Football League. Sorry, Mutant League. Yeah, Mutant Football League. I get. Back in 1993, I did a game for Electronic Arts called Mutant League Football.
Full circle, Brian.
that was a Sega Genesis title. They made a cartoon out of it and everything. It was pretty fun. The same developer contacted me like 5 years ago and said, "Hey, I'm rebooting the franchise as Mutant League Football. Sorry, Mutant Football League."
Okay.
So the EA's was Mutant League Football. This is Mutant Football League.
Love it.
So it's a spiritual successor. So I've been having a lot of fun writing. I'm doing some the sound design, writing teams for the various themes. I do some licensing in of music, again, kind of for the different teams. We We're just starting to work on Mutant Football League 2. We just wrapped up some DLC for this year for original, and we're working hard on 2 for next gen consoles and stuff.
That's
so
fantastic.
I try to keep my fingers in the pie there a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's good. And doing the sound design too, what do you enjoy about that side of game audio compared to the music side?
Oh, I've always loved the sound design side.
Yeah.
It's just the intricacy and complexity of things, right? I've got a lot of aliens bashing it, right? Mutant Football League is aliens are playing football against each other, and so there's there are different races. There's orcs and aliens and robots and humans, and so just the complexity of the sounds when you want 2 aliens to bash into each other. Okay, this one is a robot alien with this strength, and this one is a werewolf one with this strength, and okay, I need to have the tackle sound be the proper ratio of animal versus robotic, and
love that.
So the kind of, I mean, it's so different. Back when I was doing lots of games, we were still pretty limited to what I like to call audio sprites, which is, an event would happen and you play a WAV file.
Right.
Or an event would happen and you play a little MIDI sequence, a little fanfare. In pinball machines, I did a lot of times the fanfares are little musical flourishes. But now it's very detailed, interactive Foley. And so I just really enjoy that kind of puzzle of, okay, what piece of information are we going to grab from the game that will be a knob on this sound that controls the EQ level and the compression level of the low end of when they hit compared to the of the pads and the helmets and the teeth or something like that.
Yeah. And so are you implementing as well? Are you doing all the implementation? Neat. Okay. Yeah, that's cool. That's a skill set that, obviously some composers never have, and that's fine. But also there are people like yourself in the industry who really can do it all, which is pretty remarkable. I guess over your 35 years, I mean, this is a little bit of a ridiculous question, but I still want to ask it. Like, what have some of your favorite changes been? Like, you're like, oh my God, yes, we can do this now.
Well, back when I started, it was very, very technical. Like, literally, I was hired I started working at a company called Williams Electronic Games that made pinball machines and arcade games. And one of the reasons I was hired was literally because I could write a kind of computer language known as assembly language.
Okay.
Which is like really, really, really low level stuff. And so you had to be very technical in order to just make things make noise. And so it gradually got a little bit better during the 16-bit console days. But the fact that I could, if I wanted to have my audio system suddenly have sound effects that were harmonized with the background music, I could just write a little bit of code and now my system would do that. And so that was a big kind of advantage. The big inflection point in games that was sort of the hallelujah moment was probably the PlayStation 2. And that was the time where games started shipping on DVDs.
Yeah.
And that was really the first time where a composer could count on being able to say, yeah, I'm just going to record 90 minutes of music and have it ship with a game. Some people say, oh, the PlayStation 1, you could do that because it was on compact disc. I did a bunch of games for the early PlayStation and Sega Saturn at the time. And yeah, we would occasionally use the compact disc for music. But what happened is pretty quickly, game developers were like, whoa, I got 600 megabytes here. I can fill that up with full motion videos. And game I did the first time I did a game with like 3,000 lines of dialogue. The whole CD was basically dialogue. And then some game. When Madden for the first PlayStation that I worked on, that was almost all Madden's dialogue. It was almost all commentary.
Wow.
So the music, with the exception of like about a minute and a half, was all synthesized on the little chip. So it really wasn't until the PlayStation 2 that things opened up, and that's when you had, that was goodbye forever to the sound chip for the most part.
Yeah. Because then everybody had the space to do what they needed to do.
Yeah, because we were always fighting against memory and CPU.
Sure.
And we still fight against CPU, but memory became less of an issue. It still is an issue, although with the newest generation of consoles, that almost is going away completely with the PlayStation 5 and the Series X. But so the less that the composers have to fight with tech, the more they can concentrate on music. And as you say, plenty of composers have never seen Wives, never seen FMOD, and don't need to.
Right.
Especially at the high end space, right? If you're at Activision, you're at Bungie, if you're at Blizzard, you've got a team to support you.
Yeah.
It still very helps a lot to know what those tools are capable of, right? One of the things that Austin Wintory always brings to the game is he has this brilliant, I know they say Hans Zimmer is very brilliant at watching a film and figuring out, okay, when should the music start? When should I stop it? When should I not have music? Yeah. I think Austin has this ability to see a game and figure out, okay, here's where the music will go. Okay, now here's this, how I will use the state of the game to influence what the music will sound like. And then I will know to compose and orchestrate my music to be able to be controlled in that kind of way. If you look at the kind of diagrams that he does when he maps out how he approaches the game score. Yeah. So you don't need to use the tools yourself necessarily, but it helps to be familiar with what they can do, so that can influence your own composing.
Right. I mean, the opportunities now are seemingly endless.
Yeah.
But I know there's still limitations, right? I mean, implementation is really tricky and nuanced, and it's still. I know that one of the things Christopher Eng talks about with his Elias engine is, trying to make things just that much more seamless and that much more apparently linear, even if they're not. Right? Yeah, that's fun though.
I always say our goal is to, create. Well, let's just stick with music, right? Create a score for a gameplay session when somebody plays it. And it's what it would have been if we had known ahead of time exactly what they were going to do.
Right.
If we can, and all of the stuff we do at GameSoundCon or GDC or tech research or implementation or meta sounds or Elias, it's all trying to reach that goal. How do you achieve the goal of creating music ahead of time for a scenario you're not sure of the details on, but making it sound like you knew what the details were all along? And that, for me, that's kind of the fun part. And the tools, again, have gotten very rich and very sophisticated. We were talking about, does a composer need to know these tools? Probably, I would say, obviously, at the top, no. Yeah. But the farther, and I don't want to say down in a diminutive sense, but the lower the budget the game, right? If you're working on a game where, maybe you're doing the music and some of the sound design, or you don't have a big audio team to support you, being able to do more of that yourself can definitely help. And it opens up sort of this other career path. Right? I was just mentioning about Austin, how he works, right? I don't think he does the Wise stuff himself. Yeah. But that means somebody's got to do that.
Right.
And the person who does that, you want them to be really musically literate and very tech savvy. So that's a new, the job. We actually have a name for it now in the industry. That's the technical sound designer. Technical sound designer takes stuff, assets created often by other people, puts them into these middleware tools, FMOD, Wise, Elias, Fabric, CRI, there's all other ones out there. And may even also go so far as to reach into the game code and cause the sounds to happen in reaction to game events. Or, set up the occlusion and obstruction parameters, and how do you code the audio camera so that it the sound effects sound natural when the player's moving around and turning their head back and forth. And so it's a whole nother level of sort of technical skill that almost wasn't, it's almost like we've almost come full circle, right? When I started, you needed to be pretty darn technical for the most part.
Yeah.
That's why in the early days, most composers and sound designers were employees of the companies they worked for. You were a Nintendo employee or a Sega employee or a Namco employee or a Virgin employee or whomever. Once it got to the point where, like I was talking about with DVDs, okay, now we just need a composer who can give us great music from a studio. Wow, there's a lot more of those than there are people who can write assembly language.
Right.
And so the music got a lot better.
Yeah.
But then but the interactivity wasn't huge because it was kind of new.
Yeah.
And then the tools got better and the engines got better. And now there's so much complexity to taking that stuff and hooking it into the game that now there is this new role, technical sound designer, which again is somebody who's very music savvy and has very deep technical skills.
Right.
And that's probably the best ticket into the industry right now is if you really want to do game audio, and you're open to being more than just a composer only, then technical sound designer is a really good way in. It's like learn those tools really well, teach yourself how to operate them in a game engine, which might mean, you need to learn how to write some computer code, either C++ or C# or this thing called blueprints. If you have those skills, you can, I don't want to say walk into a game company, but it certainly will make your resume stand out. I have a number of former DigiPen students who are technical sound designers, and most of them are the ones that just took to the tech stuff really, really well.
Sure. That's tremendously valuable advice because people always want to get into game sound, I mean, that's really valuable insight into a different route other than just, spamming, not spamming, but, searching for games that need composers or something, hone this other set of skills that can only, I would imagine, improve your own compositional skills too. Or give you ideas.
Yeah, there's a legitimate debate to be had, right? Because,
sure.
If I've got, 4 hours in my day for self-improvement, right? I could spend that composing, and I do that every day. I'll become a pretty darn good composer if I'm composing 4 hours a day every day as personal growth. And you could say, if I'm taking away time from that to go do the technical stuff, I could see, that's a valid point, but certainly in terms of the kinds of jobs there are, having those technical skills. Again, there was a period where it didn't really matter, but the last few years, again, these roles have popped up as games have gotten, again, interactive game Foley is just tremendously complex.
Yeah.
To do it really, really well, to do a Ratchet and Clank or to do a Destiny 2, the detail and the nuance they put in, and it just shows.
Yeah.
Compared to, like, again, when I was doing games, something would happen. You play a WAV file.
Right.
Right. It's like super primitive.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I am a Destiny player, and I love the sound design in that game, and there are very specific sound effects that I look forward to hearing every time they trigger. But also, like you're saying, on the complete other end of the spectrum is something like Unpacking, right? Which had, however many thousands of... 14,000 Foley sounds. And I mean, I talked with Jeff and Angela Van Dyke about that for an hour and a half, and we could have talked for another hour and a half about all the work that they did in that game. And, it's a very complex world with, just so many options for amazing work. Yeah.
And the other thing that kind of surprises people sometimes, right? There's the sexy stuff, right? There's the orchestrate and compose and go to Abbey Road or Ocean View or whatever. That's awesome.
Yeah.
In game audio, there's an awful lot of not so sexy stuff that is just critically important. And one of them is spreadsheets.
Right. Yes.
How do you keep track of 14,000 Foley sounds and unpacking without spreadsheets? And the answer is you don't.
Right. Yeah. There's just no way.
At GameSoundCon, boy, probably 6 or 7 years ago, it was at the Biltmore, I remember, because I can picture it. We had an audio directors roundtable kind of to wrap things up. I think there was Paul Lipson and Christian Cleve and maybe Becky Allen and Russell Brower, maybe. But if somebody asked their question, hey, what piece of software should I learn if I want to get into game audio? And I think they were expecting them to say, oh, Pro Tools or Reaper or something. And everyone was like, Excel, right down the road.
Oh, that's my worst nightmare.
One of my favorite, how I got into the 3 stories is a young woman, Monet Garnier. She was applying for a sound designer gig at EA Tiburon. And, she had the interview. She got past that. She got past the second interview, did that, and they gave her a take-home sound design test over the weekend.
Oh, cool.
And, there's some amount of, putting sounds to pre-existing videos and stuff like that. One of them was this spreadsheet test. I don't remember the details. Was she had to make Excel, talk to a Microsoft Access backend, and so she spent the weekend teaching herself how does Microsoft Access interface with Excel, and so she could do this thing and she was one of only 2 people who finished that part of the test, and she got the gig, and she's at 343 right now.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I did have radio person, right? So obviously I'm not in the game industry, and my technical skills would show that. But I had a situation at a station I worked at where they're like, we need you to do this thing and make a spreadsheet. And I'm like, no. I know. I've never made a spreadsheet in my whole life. I'm not starting now. It's just like, it's so funny how, it's a really important skill. Maybe you might even call it a life skill that I, neglected to learn at some point, was how to make a spreadsheet. But yeah, it's like driving a 5-speed or something like that. You got to know how to make a spreadsheet.
Yeah. Well, there's a former student of mine who was at EA. He's at EA now. And again, something similar. He had, for a student project, he had a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheets used to track, okay, what sounds did I create? And have they been put in the game yet? Has the programmer put them in yet? And so on. And so he taught himself how to write there's a programming language associated with the Google Sheets. So you can write code to do it. And he wrote some code that whenever he changed the spreadsheet entry that he had checked in this new WISE event he would create, like for a sound effect, it would would change the color of the column, of course, but it would automatically send a Slack message to his team, letting them know, hey, there's a new sound ready to be put in the game now.
Amazing.
So
yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah, little things like that. Again, it gets back to sort of technical sound designer.
Yes.
There are a couple different things, and again, this is the unsexy bit of it, but if you want to get into the industry, it can be pretty useful.
Yeah.
In games, we do things over and over and over and over again, on a scale that movies just don't do. Dialogue, for example. A typical feature film will have maybe 1,500 lines of dialogue, maybe 1,800 if it's pretty long. Even my little Mutant Football League game, we're up to around 9,000 lines. And a typical AAA game is in the high tens of thousands or 200,000-300,000 lines of dialogue. And you just cannot manage those.
No.
Without in deep spreadsheet.
Right.
And also what we call batch processing, right? The idea is I'm going to do something and I'm going to do it on these 3,000 other sounds too.
Yep.
And so to the extent that somebody on the sound team understands the Isotope RX plugins they want to use, and can write little bits of computer code to tell the computer, hey, go do this for me 1,000 times.
Yeah.
That's a super valuable skill for a game sound designer to have, because it makes everybody more productive. And the more productive you can be, the more time you can actually spend doing the creative stuff and not the mechanical stuff.
Right.
And again, some of the things they have for dialogue are amazing, where, because people will make mistakes, right? You can't manage 100,000 lines of dialogues and not make some mistakes.
Right.
So they have systems set up now where the wave file in one column and the wise event in another column, and then the actual English sentence that is the line of dialogue in another column. And people have written things in the sound department, have written things that say, well, as a verification, let me write some code that looks at the wave file in this column, uses Google speech to text to create a text version of it, and now let me compare that with the column that has what the script had to verify that it's all correct and nobody made a mistake. And so the things people do to, again, film people don't have to do this. But
right.
Maybe they do, but not at this scale.
Right.
And then take those 100,000 lines and translate them into 12 languages, please. Yes.
Exactly. With localization and
with
proper colloquialisms.
So the in-jokes are translated appropriately. Yep. Yeah, that's a whole other discipline.
Oh, that's a very different, it just speaks to the massive world that audio encompasses, right, in games. It's a huge, huge world with huge ramifications. Are you gaming much? I mean, what's the last game you played?
That's going to be an embarrassing one.
Is it?
I still like to go out and play pinball.
I would assume.
That's where I started. That's when I was a kid. That's what my mom got mad at me for doing. And so when I want to play, I'll usually go play pinball. My son has me playing Destiny 2.
Oh, nice. We should play together.
But he usually backs me up.
Okay,
So
I have a friend like that.
Unbeknownst to me, I've been healed.
Okay.
It's like, hey, I'm doing pretty good, and it's he's back there,
like making sure you don't die. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll. My son, who actually he's a contract tester at Bungie.
Oh, fun. Okay. Oh,
and my daughter and the three of us will play that together.
Oh, nice. That's perfect. A fire team of 3. Yeah, love that.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Cool.
My kids turned me on to Danganronpa, which was super fun. So we played through that together.
Yeah.
That's a bit old school, but again, it's just nice to see what you do with not a lot of tech, right? That very super engaging game.
Yeah.
Doesn't have scores of interactive music or complex layering, or the dialogue is just those reused phrases, but it's just such a great game.
Yeah.
So nice. Despite all this cool tech I was talking about, sometimes you just need something that's fun.
Yep. Yeah. Well, if you're in Minneapolis anytime soon, we'll go to the pinball bar. Tilt, it's called. Which is fun.
I would totally do that.
Time.
Yeah, we have the.
Go ahead. I was just going to say they have amazing hot dogs, which isn't something I would normally buy out, but they're really good.
I could do hot dogs and pinball. That would work for me.
Yeah, and beer. Yeah. It's right by the art museum too. So if you're feeling like, you want to balance your day with some pinball and some fine art
and some culture, then you're all set there.
You can do that at MIA, the Minneapolis Institute of Arts. Yes. Cool. Well, Brian, what else do you want to talk about? I mean, before we shove off to our own day here.
I think that's pretty most of it. Yeah. I just felt super lucky. I feel like I've had sort of like 3 different careers. Right early on, I was doing lots of composing. Mm-hmm. That was pretty much all I did. And then at Microsoft, I was sort of heavily immersed in the tech stuff with the Xbox and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then the last 10 years or so has been, I think, mostly about community and teaching and stuff. So It's been it's an industry that's I've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of really cool people and work with lots of stupidly talented people who are also really, really genuinely good human beings, which so far has been pretty fun.
Yeah. It's a great industry. I'm glad that you're part of it and cultivating it so heavily. It's really meaningful to everyone in it. So thanks for all the work that you do, Brian.
Oh no, I have a good time. And again, it's so nice to see the Grammys this finally come.
Yeah, huge success. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so remind your composers, tweet out Grammy submissions. If they go through the Game Audio Network Guild to submit, they're due the 26th. That gives us a couple days to actually collect the data and then make the submission on their behalf. There's a fee to submit, but it's a fee that we just pass on because the Recording Academy charges us a certain amount to make a submission. Okay. But the deadline is coming up for sure.
Right.
So, yeah, you have to, the game has the eligibility period. Yeah, we should talk about that.
Yeah.
The eligibility period for a game soundtrack for the Grammys is October 1st, 2021 through September 30th, 2022.
Okay.
So if your soundtrack was released or will be released in that time period, you need to submit in the next, by August 26th.
Yeah, a week.
To be eligible for the Grammys. And the game should ideally be released within that time as well. I think they may make a little bit of allowance, like if if the game comes out in September, the soundtrack comes in October, I think that's okay.
Okay.
And again, you can find somebody who's in the Recording Academy, and they could submit for you.
Okay.
If your album was released via a record label like Lakeshore or Warner or something like that, they can probably submit it.
Sure.
Or if you go to the Game Audio Network Guild website, we can take all the information and we'll submit on your behalf. And again, the only thing that we require is that you had something to do with creating the soundtrack, typically the composer or the game company, or somebody authorized saying, yes, I was part of this. And yes, they know that we are submitting this for the Grammys.
Okay.
But the deadline is coming up.
Yeah.
And the more submissions they get, the more convinced they will be that it was the right call to finally add a category.
Yeah. I mean, I could give them a long list already in that time frame of here's who you need to be listening to right now. So
right. Well, make sure you contact them and say, hey, did you submit for the Grammys yet? And by the way, here's how.
Yeah, I will for sure. Yeah.
Because I should have reached out to you the moment this happened. As I'm sitting here thinking, I was like, who would have the music finger on the pulse of the game music industry the most? Okay, I'm sitting talking to her here.
Yeah.
So.
I'll be sending some emails over the next few days for sure.
Yes, and if they have any questions, feel free to have them contact me.
Okay.
I've talked a lot with the people who put this award together. So some people are like, oh, what about DLC and stuff like that? So they've tried to think through most of those.
Okay.
They do realize that this is a new category and there may be some things they haven't thought of.
Sure.
So when in doubt, err on submitting. Much better to submit and be turned out, I'm sorry, you weren't eligible because that's a remake of a game that came out 20 years ago.
Okay.
Better that than to not submit and it turns out you would have been eligible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like I said, there are going to be five Grammy nominees for Best Score Soundtrack for Video Games this year.
Amazing.
And one winner.
Yeah.
So don't be shy about submitting. Your music is probably awesome, and your soundtrack is probably awesome.
Yeah.
And it can stand up to anything else anybody's done.
That's right. That's right. And it's about darn time. It's I'm so grateful this is happening finally. It's well deserved, and I'm excited. Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to the Grammys this year.
Awesome. All right, Brian. Well, thank you so much for all your time. It was great to talk to you as always, and I can't wait for GameSoundCon.
All right. Yeah, I will see you in October.